How you doing? Hope you're all keeping well. I've been away a lot. I'm still going away, and I haven't had many times or many opportunities to make these kind of info videos. Now, today's one is about two topics: magic in terms of charisma and in terms of glamour. These are both magical terms. This is where they originate from. Well, they originate from spiritual things, particularly charisma, which comes from the Greek term to mean the grace of the gods. Now, when we talk about charisma, it's generally misunderstood because it's actually far more powerful than we realize, and it's also far more inherited or self-developed than just about many other qualities. Now, to have the grace of the gods, some are born naturally, and we use the term in the modern vernacular of they have it, or they have the X factor. They have this kind of thing going on. Now, that's charisma. That means you're drawn to these people. Now, why is this important in magic? Well, the more you develop your charisma, the more plausible the outcome of your will be in terms of how you are confident about it. You will have confidence in it yourself. So, for instance, if you're a bit of a sad sack and a schlub, you won't produce any magical results. In the same reason, if you're highly narcissistic, you won't do it either. Now, charisma isn't necessarily someone who looks like, a star from the golden age of Hollywood like Paul Newman or Sophie Loren or Marilyn Monroe, although they are classic examples of people with like self-realized charisma. This plays a fundamental part in the theatre as well, as does Glamour. We'll talk about that in a second. The charisma gives you the sense of inevitable consequence, inevitable outcome, and soul in terms of your magical processes and your magical rituals, because you are comfortable in yourself because other people are either comfortable or attracted to you. So the idea is that you can make your magical charge more effective by having this kind of charismatic element within your own personality. So, for instance, let's look at Crowley compared to, say, William Butler Yeats. Both magicians, both at one time in the Golden Dawn at the same time together. Crowley was phenomenally charismatic, and that's why he's the most famous magician that's ever lived, and William Butler Yeats has been forgotten except for being an incredible poet, and albeit an esoteric and occult poet. Yeats in real life was quite a dullard, boring, he was more like a civil servant type personality. He didn't have the explosive quality of Crowley in terms of people, even if they hate you, it's still charisma because they want to know you. They're aware of you. You've imposed your personality structure upon them. See, this is why, the Oscar Wilde term, it's completely correct. The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. It's the same thing with charisma. Crowley deliberately stoked the media from the time he claimed to have eaten his Sherpas in the Himalayas and told the Daily Express that, all the way to the final infamous court case. He loved all this, even though he lost court cases, even though he was slandered in the media. He knew that that was proof that his charisma was a power force, and it was actually more powerful than, say, William Butler Yeats getting the Nobel Prize for poetry. And this is the power of charisma. You have a certain element of it when you're born, but it's like a muscle, you have to work it. Now, you don't work it by being superficial, by trying to make yourself look amazing, or people think that you're great. How you improve your charisma is in incremental measures. For instance, you don't start off by trying to impress people who are very glamorous and powerful and wealthy. That will not work. You will always be in the descendancy among them. You will always be subordinate to their charisma. You start off with your peers, okay? You start off with your peers, and a great way to develop your charisma is your sense of humor. Your sense of humor will bring people to you. Now, it's a difficult thing because we're talking about magic. I have a very good sense of humor. I think I've always been good at telling jokes and delivering jokes and, you know, making people laugh. Very much designed out of my magical working, and it's that development of people laughing at your jokes that builds up your charisma too. Because there's an element of bravery in that. That's one of the reasons I did stand-up comedy and played places like Whelan's in Dublin in front of 400 or 500 people and took the place down. It was because of that. It was as much me trying to build myself up as a power force as like being, you know, funny and making people laugh, which I absolutely did. Unfortunately, the video of that is no longer online for copyright reasons, but it was quite funny. Now, that you start off with your peers and you develop it that way. And again, it's tricky because, you know, a sense of humor, not everyone is good at that. Not everyone is good at that. But you can kind of learn that too. You know, that there's a sense of humor that kind of draws people to you. And there's a sense that often making fun of yourself is a very good way of it. And often like overblowing yourself as in a kind of a satirical, farcical way is very, very funny to people. And people respect you if you make fun of yourself. That's an important one. Not, you know, in a kind of a sarcastic way, but in a kind of an ironic way. And that's another way. And you will gain this sense of confidence that builds your charisma, that brings itself into your magical workings. And it's very, very important. Now, you don't get charisma by being a follower. This is an important one. If you're one of these kids who didn't get picked to be on the football team or was last to be picked on a football team in school and maintain that mentality through your life, you will never be able to increase your charisma. I was one of those kids because I had asthma. So I fucking destroyed the football team. How did I do that? I developed other things inside me. The wankers who all got picked first ahead of me in the sports, they're all horrible and losers now. They're all like fucking still living in Ballymun, and their wives look like fucking that gorilla that was shot, you know, Hammerby or whatever his name was. With, you know, they're like these hermaphroditic dregs, and they look way older than me and everything, and have like no hair, and that's because that was their limited charisma for a short time. What I did was I got into bands. I learned to be funny. I learned to be artistic. I looked for girls that were kind of like offbeat. And that built my charisma in a different direction, you see. But if you're a follower and you long to be picked for the football team for the rest of your life, you end up joining gangs and making ridiculous decisions in your life and thinking you're getting with the winning team. And these people are often very dangerous because those ones who do that, they're like the seagulls all flying together to the dump. That's what they're like. And they're the ones, never underestimate a man or a woman of low charisma who ends up joining a gang that's probably going to destroy them for the simple reason that they think it's the gang that has the power at the moment because they're desperate to be picked for the football team. They will never ever develop their charisma, and often it ends in appalling. It always ends in appalling consequences because this was the backbone of things like the Holocaust and the Stalinistic purges. Weak men and weak women who wanted to impress their boss. You see, this is atrocities, or wanted to oppress what they thought was the winning side. Atrocities created through the ability to transcend one's personal insecurities of being mundane. It's always been used in this way, and this is why magicians and magic circles often lure these people in as kind of like lures for demons and stuff like that. I wouldn't do that, but it's fucking dark, but it does go on. The kid who's brought to by the heavy metalers to summon Satan or whatever like that, and ends up getting, you know, knifed to death or something. It happens, unfortunately. Now, so the charisma thing must be worked on through things like your personality, your sense of humor, your sense of working with your limitations. I know that I wouldn't stand a chance being around Hollywood stars. Or, you know, well, the 1940s Hollywood stars, people, and there's lots of people I know, it's sort of my peer group, that I wouldn't I know that they're much better people than me, and you know, in terms of how they've developed their own charisma. And you know, I would never sort of like assume that I could be their friend or, you know, have a relationship with one of these kinds of people. That's never going to happen, because I'm aware of my limitations as well, and that's a very important thing, because when you're aware of your own charismatic limitations, it actually makes it more powerful than being, should we say, hyperinflated about it, because then you're going to have problems. And that's charisma. Now you have also glamour. Now glamour is something that I used to think was a load of rubbish. I thought it was just like cosplay dress up, and it is in kind of like Wicca or these like fake druids and stuff like that. But it does really work for some people, because some people have difficulty transcending or transforming into the, shall we say, that the hyper consciousness state required for magical ritual. Now I have a friend who was a member of the Golden Dawn in Dublin, and she was like, oh, she was telling me, oh, it was too complex, the rituals and the rites and the initiations, they're just really difficult and hard. But she goes, what changed it for me was when I used to dress me up like Cleopatra. She said, I felt like with the makeup and the costumes and the sort of dress like in the ancient Egyptian things, she said it was transformative. It was like a peacock raising their feathers. And you see, that was the glamour, because the glamour allows you to be a hyper version of what you are in terms of your consciousness. Now, we saw this with the glam rock in the early 70s with the likes of Bowie and Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane and all this, Mark Bolan. Roy Wood was in a band called Wizard, and it went on and on. These were people who came out of the occult scene in the late 60s, or were aware of it or knew it, and put on the glam rock image in order to increase their charge. So to give them, the band Kiss is another classic example, quite a mundane garage band in many ways, although they do have some good tunes. They did get better, but when they started they were like a bad Slade. What did they do? They painted their faces up more with crazy costumes, and next thing you know, they're playing stadiums. That was the glamour. That was the glamour they used. And so people do enjoy when they're doing, or they do need it. They do need this, you know. I mean, I don't see any personal need for it. I'm not one of these people that was ever into dressing up and things like that. You know, not since the punk rock goth days when I was a kid. But yes, even that, it brings you, so it lifts you somewhere else. It takes you somewhere else. Now, where charisma and glamour are beautifully meshed is in drag queens. If you read my book, Sorcery, The Invocation of Strangeness, link down below, I suggest you read it. I talk and I go on about drag queens, how drag queens have a ferocious magical charge, ferocious, and they harken back to the time of the satyrs and the idea of the womanly man, bisexual, transgender, gender fluid, hermaphroditic, harlequin. You know, like when a drag queen is really in the zone and done up, they look like those lizards that flare up, or a cobra that flares up, and you're captivated. You're absolutely captivated by them. I don't know anyone who doesn't think drag queens are amazing. I mean, I find them incredible. And of course, Boy George, 10 years after the glam rock thing, became a kind of a sather for the New Romantics. And the New Romantic kind of combined both images, more kind of hermaphroditic, but still very much locked into the glam rock thing. The same glamour, the same thing was going on. And from that, you increase your charisma. So glamour is a great way to increase your charisma, because you're hiding yourself at a conscious level. And because you're hidden behind the glamorous image, like of something really flash and outrageous and tons of makeup and paint and everything like that, you are freed up then to develop your charisma, because you're no longer trapped by the idiosyncratic nature of your own personality hang-ups. In fact, if there's one thing that liberates the self more than anything else, it's things like glamour. That's what, like, it's almost like charisma is the kind of glue between the personality and the self. And again, when you have the personality and the self in sync, you have a powerful magical charge. So remember, charisma, you can develop it, but you've got to work with your limitations in incremental piecemeal stages in order to get to the level where it's powerful. Many of us don't do it. I still haven't done it yet. And then you have glamour. Glamour is the transformation or the transcendency of your average everyday person into a kind of a demigod. And this also charges your charisma. You want to know more about this? The Sorcery, the Improvisation of Strangeness, link down below. Take care of yourselves and look after yourselves. Bye.